In the grim darkness of the far future, the galaxy is a tapestry of war, betrayal, and shifting alliances. Among its countless denizens, two ancient powers stand as stark opposites. The indomitable Imperium of Man, a monolithic theocracy sustained by unyielding faith, and the Necrons, cold and calculating masters of a technology so advanced it defies comprehension. The very notion of these two forces aligning seems unthinkable, their histories and ideologies seemingly irreconcilable. Yet the Warhammer 40,000 universe thrives on improbable events, and the question lingers, could the Necrons ever ally with humanity? To answer this question, we must navigate the labyrinthine complexities of both factions, considering the shared threats they face and the conditions under which cooperation might arise. The Imperium's distrust of anything not strictly human is well documented, and its leaders would balk at the idea of working alongside xenos. Meanwhile, the Necrons, ancient beings who once sought to dominate all life, carry their own deep-seated animosities. However, even in a galaxy driven by hatred and division, necessity has a way of forging unlikely pacts. The galaxy's endless war is fueled not just by ideological conflicts, but by existential threats that endanger all life. The Tyranids, the Orcs, the forces of chaos, and the rising power of the Tau create an ever-shifting web of alliances, betrayals, and opportunistic ceasefires. Though both the Necrons and humanity have typically stood alone in the face of these challenges, there have been fleeting moments where survival outweighed hatred. Such moments, however brief, force us to reconsider what is possible in this brutal universe. This journey begins with understanding the players involved, the preconditions that might force cooperation, and the events that could lead to such an unprecedented alliance. The Imperium and the Necrons have endured millennia of conflict, but could the fires of war forge an alliance strong enough to stand against a greater enemy? To understand this, we must first look beyond surface-level animosities to the core motivations and philosophies of these enigmatic factions. Only then can we piece together the puzzle of whether humanity and the Necrons could ever stand side by side. Through this exploration, we'll dissect the key elements that define these factions and their histories. From the internal politics of the Imperium to the ancient rivalries among the Necrons, the road to understanding is fraught with peril. Yet, in such a universe, even the unlikeliest scenarios deserve to be considered. After all, the grim darkness of the far future leaves room for little else but grim possibilities. Let us embark on this thought experiment, unearthing the history, motivations, and mysteries that might lead these ancient enemies toward a fragile truce. While alliances in Warhammer 40,000 are fleeting and often doomed, they are not impossible. The stakes are high, the players are formidable, and the consequences of such a pact could reshape the galaxy in unimaginable ways. Could the Necrons and humanity ever set aside their differences to face a common threat? The answer lies in the intricate web of their shared past, present struggles, and the uncertain future that awaits. The question of whether the Necrons and humanity could ever align brings us to the key players who might influence such an outcome. On one side, we have the Necrons, a race of undying beings whose mastery of science and technology makes them one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Central to their hierarchy are the Pharaons, overlords of entire dynasties who command legions of Necron warriors and wield power on a scale that rivals star systems. Among them, certain figures stand out as pivotal players in any potential interaction with humanity. At the apex of the Necron dynasties is the Silent King, Sarek. Once the ruler of all Necrons, Sarek abandoned his people millennia ago after leading them into biotransference, the process that turned them into immortal machines. His return to the galaxy is driven by a desire to reclaim the Necron Empire and combat the growing threat of the Tyranids. While his motives often appear inscrutable, Sarek is pragmatic, capable of forming temporary alliances if it serves his greater goals. His intellect, strategic genius, and unparalleled authority make him a central figure in any scenario involving the Necrons. Another influential Necron is Awakened the Diviner, a cryptek of immense power. Awakened is a master of chronomancy, the manipulation of time itself. He is known for his ability to foresee events and shape them to his advantage. His ambitions often clash with those of other Necron leaders, but his foresight and mastery of arcane sciences make him a figure of immense influence. Should an alliance with humanity ever occur, Awakened's unique skills could play a crucial role in navigating the complexities of such a relationship. Trazyn the Infinite, a self-proclaimed preserver of history, is another key figure. While his methods are often eccentric and self-serving, Trazyn's extensive knowledge of the galaxy's history and his vast collection of artifacts make him a unique asset. His interactions with various factions, including humanity, suggest a willingness to engage with others when it suits his purposes. However, his unpredictable nature and obsession with his collection could just as easily derail any potential cooperation. Beyond individual leaders, the legions of the Necrons represent a force unlike any other. Their warriors are tireless, emotionless, and virtually indestructible. They are supported by specialized units such as the Canoptek constructs, which include scarabs and spiders, mechanical creations designed for repair, reconnaissance, and battle. These constructs exemplify the Necrons' mastery of technology and their ability to adapt to any battlefield. On the other side of this hypothetical alliance is humanity, represented primarily by the Imperium of Man. At its heart is the Emperor of Mankind, though his physical form is confined to the Golden Throne. His influence permeates every aspect of the Imperium, from its religious fervor to its military might. While the Emperor himself does not actively lead, his legacy and the ideology built around him shape humanity's interactions with all other factions, including the Necrons. Key figures within the Imperium, such as Inquisitors of the Ordo Xenos, would play significant roles in any negotiations or conflicts with the Necrons. These individuals are tasked with studying and combating alien threats, and their perspectives on the Necrons vary from outright hostility to cautious curiosity. Their knowledge of xenos species and their ability to wield considerable authority could either facilitate or obstruct any potential alliance. The Adeptus Mechanicus, with its obsession for technology, is another critical faction within humanity. The Mechanicus harbors a paradoxical relationship with the Necrons. They revere ancient technology, yet they fear and despise its alien origins. Key tech priests, especially those of the highest ranks, might see an alliance with the Necrons as an opportunity to unlock secrets of unparalleled power, though this would undoubtedly spark fierce debate within their ranks. The Astra Militarum, humanity's vast and disciplined armies, would also play a pivotal role. While their leadership might balk at the idea of allying with Xenos, their sheer numbers and adaptability on the battlefield could make them a valuable partner in any coordinated effort. Similarly, the Space Marines, humanity's elite warriors, would likely be at the forefront of any direct interactions with the Necrons, whether in battle or under the terms of a fragile truce. Finally, the Necron star gods, or Khitan, though largely shattered, remain a lingering influence. While the Necrons rebelled against these malevolent entities long ago, fragments of the Khitan still exist and can be wielded as weapons by the Necrons. Their presence adds a layer of complexity to the Necron hierarchy and could either aid or hinder any attempt at cooperation with humanity. These key players, both Necron and human, each bring their own motivations, strengths, and challenges to the table. While their goals often clash, the unpredictable nature of the galaxy ensures that even the most unlikely alliances are not beyond the realm of possibility. The stage is set for an intricate interplay of power, ambition, and necessity that could redefine the future of both factions. The roots of the complex and hostile relationship between the Necrons and humanity lie buried deep within the fabric of galactic history. These two factions, separated by unimaginable spans of time and fundamentally different in their nature and goals, are bound together by the currents of war, survival, and mutual distrust. The events leading to their rare moments of fragile cooperation are shaped by millennia of conflict and existential threats to their respective civilizations. The first encounters between the Necrons and humanity can be traced back to the discovery of Necron tomb worlds during the Imperium's relentless expansion. These ancient crypts, dormant for eons, were unintentionally disturbed by human colonists, archaeologists, and the Adeptus Mechanicus. What humanity initially saw as abandoned ruins turned out to be the slumbering remnants of an ancient, advanced civilization. When the Necrons began to awaken from their eons-long stasis, their response to these intrusions was swift and brutal, leading to widespread slaughter and the obliteration of colonies deemed to have trespassed. This marked the beginning of hostilities between the two factions. The Necrons, with their cold logic and indifference to organic life, saw humans as little more than an infestation, another in a long line of species whose dominance was transient and insignificant in the grand scheme of the galaxy. The Imperium, in turn, viewed the Necrons as an insidious xenos threat, their technology and apparent immortality a direct affront to the Emperor's divine mandate. Over the centuries, these initial skirmishes escalated into larger conflicts. The Necrons, seeking to reassert their dominance over the galaxy, clashed with Imperial forces on countless worlds. However, their motives were not always rooted in conquest. At times, the Necrons sought to defend their ancient domains or neutralize perceived threats to the stability of the galaxy. These objectives occasionally aligned with humanity's own goals, though mutual animosity always prevented meaningful cooperation. A pivotal moment that planted the seeds for potential collaboration occurred during the rise of the Tyrannid threat. The Tyrannids, an extragalactic species that consumes all organic matter, represent an existential danger to all life, including both humanity and the Necrons. The Silent King himself recognized the magnitude of this threat, as the Tyrannids' relentless consumption would ultimately leave the galaxy devoid of the sentient beings the Necrons once sought to dominate. This shared enemy forced the Necrons and humanity into an unspoken understanding, where limited, uncoordinated actions against the Tyrannids served the interests of both factions. The Great Rift, a catastrophic event that split the galaxy in two, further complicated matters. The warp storms unleashed by this event disrupted Necron stasis crypts and caused widespread havoc in the Imperium. With chaos forces surging through the breach, both humanity and the Necrons found themselves under threat from a common foe. While the Necrons had no particular allegiance to the Imperium, they shared an antipathy toward the corrupting influence of chaos. This overlapping hostility provided rare instances where the two factions inadvertently worked toward similar goals, though never in open alliance. Another contributing factor to the tenuous possibility of collaboration is the sheer unpredictability of galactic politics and warfare. The Imperium, while staunchly xenophobic, has demonstrated a capacity for pragmatism when survival is at stake. Similarly, the Necrons, despite their disdain for organic life, have shown that their actions are often guided by cold logic rather than emotion or ideology. These traits suggest that under extreme circumstances, both factions could set aside their enmity for the sake of self-preservation. The patterns of conflict and grudging tolerance between the Necrons and humanity were further influenced by humanity's insatiable hunger for knowledge and resources. The Adeptus Mechanicus, in particular, sought to uncover and exploit Necron technology, often at great risk. While these pursuits typically ended in disaster, they occasionally revealed truths about the galaxy's ancient history that altered humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. This growing awareness of shared threats and vulnerabilities, however faint, has laid the groundwork for the faint possibility of mutual cooperation. The backdrop of these interactions is the galaxy itself, a place of unending war, shifting alliances, and impossible odds. The scale and scope of the conflicts that define the Warhammer 40,000 universe create an environment where even the most unlikely scenarios, such as an alliance between the Necrons and humanity, become conceivable. While mistrust and hatred remain the default, the currents of necessity and desperation have forced both factions to reconsider their positions, if only temporarily. Thus, the events leading up to the question of whether the Necrons and humanity could ally are not defined by a single moment, but by a series of cascading developments. From the initial discovery of Necron tombs to the rise of galaxy-spanning threats like the Tyranids and Chaos, the galaxy's relentless turmoil has created a foundation where the unthinkable is no longer entirely impossible. These preconditions are essential to understanding how such an alliance, however fragile, could emerge. Instances where humanity and the Necrons came close to cooperation are rare and fleeting, but they provide valuable insight into the dynamics between these two vastly different factions. These moments of near collaboration were not born of trust or mutual respect, but rather of shared necessity or pragmatic decision-making. Each represents a unique convergence of circumstances where survival or shared goals momentarily overshadowed the pervasive hostility. One of the most notable moments occurred during the rise of the Tyranid threat. The Necrons, under the leadership of the Silent King, recognized the unparalleled danger posed by the Tyranids' relentless consumption of all biological life. The Silent King's long exile had allowed him to see the larger galactic picture, including the reality that the Tyranids were an existential threat not only to organic species, but also to the galaxy's infrastructure and the sentient beings that the Necrons still sought to dominate. In isolated cases, Necron forces clashed with Tyranid swarms in regions also contested by Imperial forces. While these engagements were not formally coordinated, there were instances where Imperial commanders, recognizing the Necrons' effectiveness against Tyranids, adapted their strategies to take advantage of this mutual hostility. One such case occurred on the planet Karnak. This world, situated near the edge of the Tyranid invasion routes, became a battleground where Necron legions and the Astra Militarum clashed with overwhelming Tyranid swarms. While the two factions did not formally ally, they each engaged the Tyranids in a way that indirectly benefited the other. Imperial commanders observed the precision and destructive efficiency of Necron forces and adjusted their tactics to exploit openings created by Necron assaults. The battle ultimately decimated the Tyranid presence on Karnak, and while no formal communication occurred, both humanity and the Necrons withdrew without turning on one another. This silent acknowledgement of shared priorities, however brief, marked a significant moment in their interactions. Another significant episode took place during the catastrophic opening of the Great Rift. When the galaxy was split asunder by this warp storm, countless systems were plunged into chaos. In one such system, Imperial forces on a Forge world discovered that a Necron tomb beneath their planet had begun to awaken. As the tides of chaos descended upon the region, the Necrons emerged, initially slaughtering any humans who crossed their path. However, as demonic forces threatened to overrun both the planet and the Necron tomb, a peculiar shift occurred. Recognizing that the Chaos incursion posed a threat to their ancient stasis crypts, the Necrons began to target the demonic entities with relentless precision. The beleaguered Imperial defenders, facing annihilation, exploited the Necrons' intervention to fortify their positions and repel the demonic forces. Though the two factions never directly coordinated, their shared efforts against Chaos saved the Forge world from destruction. A more deliberate, if fragile, moment of collaboration occurred during a joint effort to seal a C'tan shard. The C'tan, ancient star gods who had once enslaved the Necrons, remain a persistent threat to their former servants and the galaxy at large. In a rare instance, a shard of one of these entities became a danger to both humanity and the Necrons. On the remote world of Pyria, an inquisitor of the Ordo Xenos uncovered the presence of a C'tan fragment wreaking havoc in the region. The Necrons, led by a cryptek whose motives remain unclear, sought to contain the shard before it could escape. This resulted in an uneasy truce between the Inquisitor's forces and the Necron detachment. While neither side trusted the other, their shared objective led to a coordinated effort to neutralize the Shard. The operation succeeded, but the aftermath was tense, with both factions retreating from the battlefield, wary of future encounters. Another moment of potential collaboration arose in the exploration of Necron technology by certain rogue elements within the Adeptus Mechanicus. Some tech priests, driven by their insatiable hunger for knowledge, established clandestine communication with Necron cryptex in hopes of exchanging information. While these interactions were limited and fraught with suspicion, they demonstrated that mutual curiosity could bridge the divide, however temporarily. These engagements were often cut short by internal Imperial investigations or sudden acts of betrayal, but they remain a testament to the shared interest in technological advancement that could, under different circumstances, serve as a foundation for cooperation. In addition, there are whispered accounts of isolated Necron dynasties engaging with human forces on the fringes of the galaxy. These instances typically involve smaller, less aggressive Necron factions that prioritize the preservation of their domains over conquest. In these rare cases, Necron leaders have been known to tolerate human settlements within their regions so long as their borders remain respected. Such tenuous arrangements are far from alliances, but they highlight the potential for coexistence under specific conditions. These moments of near collaboration are marked by their brevity and fragility, underscoring the immense challenges of forging any lasting alliance between the Necrons and humanity. However, they also reveal the intricate web of motivations, threats, and opportunities that define their relationship, hinting at the unlikely paths that might lead to an unprecedented partnership. Each instance serves as a fragment of a larger, unfolding narrative, showing that even in a galaxy defined by war and hatred, the possibility of cooperation is never entirely out of reach. A pivotal event that could lead to an alliance between the Necrons and humanity would require a shift so profound that it alters the very fabric of their respective perspectives. This change would not emerge from a single battle or encounter, but from a shared recognition of an existential threat so immense that it surpasses all other priorities. Such a moment of realization could be catalyzed by the overwhelming and escalating threat of the Tyranids. The growing hive fleets, now swarming across the galaxy in greater numbers, might force a reluctant acknowledgement of mutual dependence for survival. The key turning point could arise in the wake of a catastrophic Tyranid invasion targeting multiple star systems critical to both the Necrons and the Imperium. Imagine a cluster of tomb worlds and forge worlds being simultaneously overrun, each containing resources and technologies vital to the survival of their respective civilizations. As the Tyranids adapt and evolve, their relentless march threatens not only organic life, but also the Necrons' carefully maintained domains. The sheer scale of the assault could compel both factions to reconsider their strategies. The catalyst for cooperation could take the form of a summit, a clandestine meeting orchestrated through intermediaries such as rogue inquisitors or pragmatic cryptex. This unprecedented negotiation would stem from a desperate calculation by the Silent King, whose focus on the long-term survival of the galaxy outweighs the ancient hatred harbored toward organic species. Recognizing that humanity's sheer numbers and adaptability complement the Necrons' precision and technological superiority, he may propose a temporary truce. This offer would hinge on a single condition: cooperation to repel the Tyranid threat from the affected systems and ensure the protection of critical assets for both sides. For humanity, the acceptance of this offer would require a monumental decision, likely spearheaded by elements of the Ordo Xenos or high-ranking Imperial commanders with the authority to override traditional xenophobic doctrine. Their reasoning would be simple yet revolutionary. Failure to act would result in the annihilation of key sectors and further empower the Tyranids. While the Imperium's official stance would remain unyieldingly hostile toward Xenos, This collaboration would be framed as a tactical necessity, not an ideological shift. The moment of commitment would come when Necron legions and Imperial forces joined their efforts to strike at the heart of the Tyranid swarm. The Necrons would deploy their unparalleled technology, including their devastating star-tearing weapons and mastery of phase-based warfare, to neutralize the Tyranid biomass. Simultaneously, Imperial forces, leveraging their vast armies and robust infrastructure, would focus on containment and coordinated assaults. Together, they would achieve what neither could accomplish alone: a decisive blow that halts the Tyranid advance and preserves their mutual interests. What makes this event a turning point is not just the immediate tactical success, but the precedent it sets. For the first time, two civilizations driven by fundamentally different ideologies would have demonstrated the potential for coordinated action. The Silent King's role in initiating this alliance would be pivotal. His vision of a galaxy purged of chaotic influences and rebuilt under Necron order would align, however temporarily, with humanity's desire to protect its people and territories. This shared goal, born out of desperation, could foster an understanding that, under extreme circumstances, cooperation is not only possible but necessary. The aftermath of this alliance would resonate far beyond the battlefield. Within the Necron dynasties, debates would rage over the wisdom of working with an organic species, even temporarily. Some cryptechs and pharaons might see the alliance as a betrayal of Necron purity, while others would view it as a pragmatic step toward reclaiming galactic dominance. For the Imperium, this decision would spark intense controversy among its leadership. While some would condemn the alliance as heretical, others would point to its success as a justification for further pragmatic actions in the face of existential threats. The key to this event's significance lies in the broader implications it carries. It would mark the first instance of both factions acknowledging that their survival might depend on cooperation rather than endless conflict. While this alliance would undoubtedly be temporary, it would leave an indelible mark on their histories. The precedent set by such an event could influence future interactions, opening the door for further collaboration under similarly dire circumstances. Ultimately, the decision to ally would hinge on a single realization: the galaxy is no longer a place where any one faction can survive in isolation. The existential threats posed by forces like the Tyranids, Chaos, and other xenos empires have escalated to a scale that transcends ancient enmities. This turning point, driven by necessity and executed through coordinated action, would forever alter the dynamic between humanity and the Necrons, proving that even in a galaxy defined by hatred, survival can bring the unlikeliest of allies together. The alliance between the Necrons and humanity, however temporary or begrudging, would send shockwaves throughout the galaxy, fundamentally altering its political, social, and military dynamics. For a universe defined by endless conflict and unwavering ideological divides, such a collaboration would represent an unprecedented disruption, forcing every faction to reevaluate its strategies and alliances. Among humanity, the reaction to this alliance would be deeply polarizing. For the average Imperial citizen, indoctrinated by centuries of xenophobic propaganda and unwavering faith in the Emperor, the revelation of cooperation with the Necrons would be almost incomprehensible. The ecclesiastical leaders of the Adeptus Ministorum would face an immense challenge in explaining such an act without undermining the core tenets of imperial doctrine. Many priests and zealots would decry the decision as heresy, sparking widespread unrest and potential rebellions in particularly devout sectors. On the other hand, those in the Adeptus Mechanicus who had long coveted Necron technology might view the alliance as a necessary evil or even a golden opportunity. The Necrons' mastery of sciences far beyond human comprehension could open avenues for advancements in weaponry, transportation, and medicine that would have otherwise remained unattainable. However, this would come at the cost of deep divisions within the Mechanicus itself, as some tech priests would embrace this opportunity, while others would view it as a betrayal of their sacred duty to preserve human technological purity. The common soldier, Whether an Astra Militarum trooper or a Space Marine would experience a mix of awe and unease in the presence of Necron forces fighting alongside them. The Necrons' eerie silence and relentless precision on the battlefield would instill both respect and fear, creating a fragile camaraderie forged in shared survival rather than genuine trust. While victories achieved through this alliance might bolster morale temporarily, the constant reminder of the Necrons' alien nature would prevent any lasting sense of unity. For other factions, the implications of a Necron-Imperium alliance would be profound. The forces of chaos, already relentless in their efforts to destabilize the galaxy, would see this union as an existential threat. Chaos thrives on division and despair, and the cooperation of two major powers, even briefly, would disrupt their plans. Demons and their mortal followers would intensify their assaults, aiming to exploit the fragile trust between the Necrons and humanity, hoping to fracture the alliance before it could yield further success. The Orcs, ever opportunistic and drawn to large-scale conflict, would revel in the chaos caused by such an alliance. The sheer spectacle of Necrons and humans battling side by side against common foes would likely draw hordes of Orcs eager to join the fray, escalating the scale of war across multiple sectors. However, the Orcs' lack of ideological alignment would make them less of a targeted threat and more of an unpredictable variable. The Eldar, both Asuryani and Drukhari, would perceive this alliance with a mixture of dread and disdain. The Asuryani, with their long history of opposing the Necrons, would view humanity's decision as a reckless gamble, risking the resurgence of Necron dominance over the galaxy. The Drukhari, on the other hand, would likely exploit the confusion and instability caused by the alliance, launching raids on vulnerable sectors to feed their dark appetites. The Harlequins, as keepers of the galaxy's ancient lore, might take a more measured stance, seeing the alliance as a necessary response to larger existential threats like chaos and the Tyranids. The Tyranids themselves, the catalyst for such an alliance, would likely shift their strategies in response to the newfound coordination between two formidable enemies. The hive mind, adapting to the challenge, might prioritize targeting weaker factions to compensate for the increased resistance from combined Necron and Imperial forces. This shift could inadvertently destabilize other regions of the galaxy, drawing previously unaffected races into the conflict. Even the Tau Empire, with its emphasis on diplomacy and unity, would find itself at a crossroads. The Tau might see the alliance as a glimmer of hope that even the most unlikely factions can find common ground. However, their optimism would be tempered by the realization that this alliance is built on necessity rather than mutual respect, serving as a reminder of the galaxy's brutal realities. For the Necrons themselves, the impact of the alliance would be no less profound. Internally, debates would rage within the dynasties about the wisdom of such cooperation. More traditionalist leaders might view the alliance as a betrayal of their disdain for organic life, while pragmatists could argue that it was a necessary step to ensure the survival of their species and domains. The Silent King, as the architect of the alliance, would face both support and dissent from his subordinates, further complicating the already fractured politics of the Necron dynasties. The immediate aftermath of the alliance would also see a ripple effect across neutral and independent systems. Rogue traders, mercenaries, and other unaligned forces would seize the opportunity to exploit the shifting power dynamics, either aligning themselves with the newly cooperative factions or leveraging the chaos to expand their influence. Worlds on the fringes of Necron and Imperial space might find themselves caught between two masters, uncertain whether to fear subjugation or embrace the protection offered by the Alliance. Ultimately, the galaxy would not remain static in the face of such a momentous event. The Alliance, even if temporary, would create new opportunities and challenges for every faction. It would force a rethinking of long-held strategies, upend traditional hierarchies, and introduce a level of unpredictability that would shape the galaxy's future in ways no one could fully anticipate. While the Alliance would not erase the enmity between the Necrons and humanity, It would demonstrate that in the grim darkness of the far future, even the most unlikely partnerships can become reality when survival is at stake. A particularly intriguing aspect of the question about a potential alliance between the Necrons and humanity lies in the interplay of their technologies and philosophies, and how these elements might interact if brought together. Both factions are shaped by their distinct approaches to warfare, science, and existence itself, making their potential collaboration a fascinating point of discussion among fans. These unique attributes provide fertile ground for speculation about the practicalities and consequences of such an alliance. One of the most captivating aspects is the Necrons' unparalleled mastery of technology. Their ability to manipulate matter on a subatomic level, their use of Gauss weaponry capable of stripping molecules from their targets, and their nearly indestructible bodies make them one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. In contrast, the Imperium of Man relies on a mix of ancient technology and dogmatic rituals. This stark difference raises questions about how the two might integrate their strengths. Would humanity adapt Necron technology into its war machine, or would the Mechanicus fiercely resist such integration, fearing heresy and corruption? The prospect of humans wielding Necron-inspired weaponry is both tantalizing and terrifying. Another widely discussed topic is the philosophical dichotomy between the two factions. The Necrons, once flesh and blood beings, sacrificed their mortality for immortality, becoming soulless machine entities. This transformation left them devoid of the emotions and spiritual beliefs that dominate human culture. The Imperium, by contrast, is built upon an intricate web of faith, superstition, and a divine hierarchy centered on the Emperor. If these two factions were to ally, it would force humanity to confront a reality devoid of spiritual significance, a direct challenge to the Imperium's deeply ingrained belief system. Fans often speculate how this clash of worldviews could lead to cultural shifts within the Imperium, with some even imagining radical factions within humanity embracing a Necron-like rejection of faith in favor of cold logic. One particularly popular point of discussion revolves around the Necron capacity for temporal manipulation. Cryptechs specializing in chronomancy possess the ability to manipulate time, a power that is largely absent from the Imperium's technological arsenal. This ability could fundamentally alter the nature of warfare and governance within the Imperium, offering a means to foresee and counter threats before they arise. Fans often debate whether such technology could ever be shared, or whether it would be zealously guarded by the Necrons, preventing humanity from acquiring an edge that could later be used against them. The potential impact of such an alliance on the galactic balance of power is another area of frequent speculation. Together, the Necrons and humanity would form an unprecedented superpower, capable of challenging even the most formidable threats like the Tyranids or the forces of chaos. However, this raises concerns about the reaction from other factions, particularly the Eldar, who have long viewed both humanity and the Necrons as existential threats to their own survival. The fan community often explores scenarios in which the Eldar are forced to form desperate alliances of their own to counter the combined might of the Necrons and the Imperium. Another captivating aspect is the role of individual Necron leaders and their motivations. Figures like Trazyn the Infinite, with his eccentric obsession with collecting historical artifacts, often spark speculation about how his unique perspective could influence an alliance. Would Trazyn's intellectual curiosity lead him to cooperate with humanity in the name of preserving galactic history? Or would his self-serving tendencies undermine any potential collaboration? Similarly, the Silent King's return to the galaxy and his pragmatic approach to survival make him a central figure in discussions about the feasibility of such an alliance. His willingness to engage with humanity for the greater good of the Necrons raises questions about whether other Pharons would follow his lead or rebel against his vision. Finally, fans frequently discuss the ethical implications of such an alliance. The Necrons' disregard for organic life and their history of exterminating countless species starkly contrasts with humanity's at least nominal value for life. An alliance would force humanity to reconcile its xenophobic policies with the pragmatic necessity of working alongside a species that has caused immense suffering. This moral dilemma is often explored in fan-created narratives, where characters grapple with the tension between survival and ideology. These unique aspects of the Necron-human dynamic fuel endless debates and creative interpretations within the fan community. They offer a glimpse into the profound complexities and dramatic possibilities that would arise from such an unprecedented partnership, ensuring that the question remains a fascinating point of speculation for years to come. The individuals who could shape the alliance between the Necrons and humanity represent a mix of ambition, pragmatism, and vision, each contributing uniquely to the formation or disruption of such a partnership. On both sides, these figures bring their own motivations, skills, and influence to the table, driving the negotiations and confronting the challenges that arise. This union, fragile and unprecedented, would hinge on the actions of these prominent personalities. At the forefront of the Necron side is the Silent King, Zarek, whose return to the galaxy is defined by his mission to preserve the remnants of Necron civilization. Zarek's strength lies in his ability to see the larger picture, unburdened by the petty rivalries and dogmatic thinking that often define his subordinates. His pragmatism and strategic genius would make him the architect of any agreement with humanity. Zarek's ultimate goal would be the survival and resurgence of the Necron dynasties, and he would view an alliance with humanity as a necessary step to combat existential threats like the Tyranids and Chaos. His weakness, however, lies in the fragmented loyalty of the Necron dynasties. Not all Pharaons and Cryptex would support his decisions, and internal dissent could threaten to derail his plans. From humanity's side, a high-ranking inquisitor of the Ordo Xenos would likely take the lead in initiating and maintaining the alliance. Such an individual would need to be exceptionally pragmatic, willing to set aside the Imperium's rigid xenophobia in favor of ensuring humanity's survival. This Inquisitor's strength would lie in their ability to navigate the labyrinthine politics of the Imperium while simultaneously managing the volatile relationship with the Necrons. Their access to extensive resources and their ability to command respect among Imperial forces would be crucial. However, their position would also make them a target for accusations of heresy from more zealous elements within the Inquisition and the Ecclesiarchy. Key to facilitating the actual terms of the alliance would be a representative of the Adeptus Mechanicus. A senior tech priest, perhaps a Magos Dominus with a deep fascination for Necron technology, could act as a bridge between the two factions. Their expertise in deciphering and appreciating the advanced science of the Necrons would allow for technical negotiations, such as agreements to share knowledge or resources. This tech priest's strength would be their unparalleled understanding of Xenos technology, but their obsession with such knowledge could also make them a liability, as their enthusiasm might lead to compromises that could later harm humanity. From the Necron side, Trazyn the Infinite could also play a pivotal role, though not necessarily in a conventional diplomatic capacity. Trazyn's vast collection of historical artifacts and his knowledge of galactic history could make him a valuable intermediary. While his self-serving nature might complicate matters, his unique perspective on the long-term consequences of galactic events could contribute to Zarek's efforts. Trazyn's greatest strength is his encyclopedic knowledge, but his eccentricity and tendency to prioritize his collection above all else might undermine his reliability in a formal negotiation. However, such an alliance would not proceed unchallenged. Within humanity, the Ecclesiarchy would vehemently oppose any collaboration with Xenos, viewing it as an affront to the Emperor's divine mandate. Fanatical cardinals and militant zealots might organize uprisings or even outright sabotage attempts to disrupt the alliance. These efforts would reflect the deeply ingrained xenophobia of the Imperium's religious institutions, whose rigid doctrines leave little room for pragmatism. From the Necron side, Awakened the Diviner could emerge as a wild card. As a cryptek who manipulates time and seeks to shape the future to his advantage, Awakened's goals often clash with those of the Silent King. If Awakened perceives the Alliance as a threat to his own designs, he might act to sabotage it, either by undermining Zarek's authority or by manipulating events to create mistrust between the two factions. Awakened's strength lies in his foresight and cunning, but his hubris and tendency to act independently could lead to unforeseen consequences. Among other factions, the Eldar would almost certainly attempt to disrupt this union. The Asuryani, with their ancient enmity toward the Necrons and their distrust of humanity, would see such an alliance as a catastrophic shift in the galactic balance of power. Farseers might use their psychic abilities to orchestrate events that sow discord between the allies, while their military forces could target key assets to prevent the Alliance from gaining traction. The Eldar's greatest strength is their prescience and ability to manipulate events from the shadows, but their arrogance and unwillingness to cooperate with other races might hinder their efforts. The forces of chaos would also act to destabilize the Alliance. Demons and their mortal followers thrive on division and conflict, and a unified front of Necrons and humanity would represent a direct threat to their existence. Subtle infiltration, corruption, and the exploitation of internal dissent within both factions would form the cornerstone of their strategy. Their strength lies in their unpredictability and ability to exploit weakness, but their chaotic nature often leads to disorganized efforts that can backfire. The formation of any agreement between the Necrons and humanity would likely take the form of a non-aggression pact or a limited-term truce, rather than a formal treaty. Both sides would be acutely aware of the fragile nature of such an arrangement, relying on shared necessity rather than genuine trust. Terms might include agreements to divide territories, coordinate against specific enemies, or exchange technological insights under strict conditions. The individuals involved in shaping this alliance, as well as those who seek to undermine it, represent the intricate web of motivations and ambitions that define the galaxy. Their strengths, weaknesses, and conflicting goals would make the process of forging and maintaining such a partnership as perilous and unpredictable as the galaxy itself. The possibility of an alliance between the Necrons and humanity raises numerous unresolved questions and theories that provoke deep discussion within the Warhammer 40,000 community. These speculations are rooted in the complexities of both factions, their histories, and the unpredictable nature of the galaxy itself. Among the most debated topics are the practicalities of such a partnership, the Necrons' potential alliances with other factions, and the lingering uncertainties about their motivations. One of the most pressing questions revolves around the durability of any alliance between the Necrons and humanity. Both factions have fundamentally different goals and philosophies. Humanity's reliance on faith and collective will contrast sharply with the Necrons' cold logic and individualistic ambitions among their dynasties. Fans often wonder whether such a partnership could withstand the inevitable disputes over territory, technology, or cultural differences. The Imperium's xenophobia and the Necrons' disdain for organic life create a volatile foundation that could collapse at the slightest provocation. Would the alliance be little more than a tactical ceasefire, or could it evolve into a more enduring relationship? Another significant question concerns the motivations of the Silent King and other key Necron leaders. While Zarek has shown a willingness to act pragmatically in the face of existential threats like the Tyranids, it is unclear how far he would be willing to go in terms of cooperation. Some speculate that the Silent King might view humanity as a means to an end, leveraging their strength to combat mutual enemies before ultimately turning against them. Others theorize that his vision extends beyond mere survival, potentially involving a reshaping of the galaxy where Necrons reclaim their ancient dominance, even if it requires temporary collaboration. The nature of Necron dynastic politics further complicates the question. Each dynasty operates with a significant degree of autonomy, often pursuing its own interests rather than adhering to a unified strategy. This raises the question of whether all dynasties would support or even tolerate an alliance with humanity. Some dynasties might see such a partnership as a betrayal of their identity, while others could embrace it as an opportunity to expand their influence. The internal friction among the necrons themselves is a significant unknown that could either strengthen or undermine the alliance. Theories also abound about whether the necrons might form alliances with other factions in the galaxy. One of the most intriguing possibilities involves the Tau Empire. The Tau, with their emphasis on diplomacy and unity, might represent a more compatible partner for the necrons compared to the Imperium. Both factions value pragmatism and technological advancement, potentially providing a foundation for cooperation. However, the Tau's idealistic pursuit of the greater good clashes with the necrons' self-centered motives, raising questions about whether such a partnership could ever be realized. Another potential ally for the necrons could be the craft world Eldar. While this idea seems far-fetched due to the ancient enmity between the two, there are rare instances where shared threats, such as the forces of chaos, could force these factions to cooperate. Fans often debate whether the Eldar's foresight and the Necrons' temporal technologies might create an unlikely but powerful synergy in combating the warp's corruption. However, the deep-seated mistrust between these two ancient races makes this scenario highly speculative. A particularly contentious theory involves the Necrons' relationship with the Tyranids. While the Necrons are typically seen as one of the few factions with the capability to decisively combat the Tyranids, some fans speculate whether a rogue dynasty or cryptek might attempt to manipulate or even control the hive mind. Such a scenario would raise significant ethical and strategic dilemmas for other factions, particularly humanity, which would face the dual challenge of combating the Tyranids while also dealing with Necron machinations. The role of Necron technology in shaping alliances is another area of unresolved debate. The Necrons' mastery of sciences that transcend human understanding creates both opportunities and risks. Could humanity's access to Necron technologies spark internal divisions, with some factions embracing these advancements while others resist them? Furthermore, would the Necrons share their most valuable secrets, or would they deliberately withhold critical knowledge to maintain their superiority? Fans often theorize about the consequences of humans gaining access to Necron weapons or infrastructure, and whether this would lead to unintended consequences, such as the rise of rogue factions within the Imperium. The psychological impact of such an alliance on both factions remains an open question. For the Necrons, whose memories of their organic past are often fragmented or suppressed, working alongside humans might evoke a sense of nostalgia or resentment. Could prolonged interaction with humanity rekindle elements of their lost emotions and individuality, or would it deepen their disdain for organic life? For humanity, the presence of Necrons as allies would force a re-evaluation of their place in the galaxy and their relationship with other xenos species. Could this lead to a gradual shift in imperial ideology, or would it reinforce existing divisions between the more progressive and traditionalist elements within the Imperium? Finally, the potential reaction of external factions adds another layer of complexity. The Eldar, Orcs, Chaos, and other races would undoubtedly act to exploit the uncertainties surrounding such an alliance. The galaxy's balance of power would shift dramatically, creating opportunities for smaller factions to rise or for long-standing rivalries to intensify. Would the galaxy see an escalation of conflict as other factions react to the new power dynamic? Or could this alliance inspire a series of broader negotiations, reshaping the galactic landscape? These unresolved questions and speculative theories underscore the profound impact that a Necron-human alliance could have on the Warhammer 40,000 universe. They highlight the intricate web of possibilities and challenges that make this topic a source of endless fascination and debate among fans. While the answers remain elusive, the exploration of these ideas adds depth and richness to the grim darkness of the far future. The long-term consequences of an alliance between the Necrons and humanity would ripple through the galaxy, reshaping its political and military landscape in ways that could be both transformative and destructive. While the immediate gains of such a partnership might provide a temporary reprieve from existential threats, the deeper implications would unfold over centuries, altering the balance of power, ideology, and interfactional dynamics in profound ways. Initially, the alliance would create a new era of unprecedented cooperation in the galaxy, at least in the short term. The combined military power of humanity and the Necrons could allow for decisive victories against shared enemies such as the Tyranids, Chaos, and other invasive forces. These victories might secure critical territories, preserve vital resources, and bring a semblance of stability to otherwise war-torn sectors. This initial success could set a precedent for other factions to consider pragmatic partnerships, potentially reducing the overall chaos in the galaxy. However, the underlying tensions between the Necrons and humanity would ensure that the alliance remains fragile. As both factions achieve their immediate goals, their conflicting long-term ambitions would resurface. The Necrons' desire to restore their former dominance would clash with humanity's expansionist tendencies, leading to inevitable disputes over territory and influence. While the Silent King and pragmatic Imperial leaders might strive to maintain the alliance, internal pressures from both factions would threaten its longevity. For humanity, the long-term effects of the alliance could include significant shifts in ideology and governance. Exposure to Necron technology and strategies might inspire reformist elements within the Imperium to advocate for a more rational and less dogmatic approach to warfare and science. Such changes, however, would provoke fierce resistance from traditionalists within the Ecclesiarchy and the Adeptus Mechanicus, potentially leading to internal strife. The Imperium's identity, long anchored in its faith and rigid structures, could begin to fracture under the weight of these competing visions for its future. The Necrons, too, would face internal challenges as a result of the alliance. Dynasties that oppose collaboration with organics might rebel against the Silent King's authority, fracturing the already fragile unity of their species. Some cryptex or pharaons might exploit the alliance to further their own agendas, using humanity as a tool to advance their dynastic interests before ultimately turning against their erstwhile allies. The alliance, while beneficial in the short term, would likely exacerbate the internal divisions within the Necron civilization, accelerating its eventual fragmentation. The question of whether the alliance would inspire new coalitions in the galaxy is another critical consideration. If other factions observe the successes achieved by the Necrons and humanity, they might be encouraged to pursue similar partnerships. The Tau, known for their diplomatic strategies, could leverage this trend to forge alliances with other xenos species, potentially creating a counterbalance to the Necron Imperium partnership. Even the Eldar, long reluctant to ally with others, might reconsider their isolationist policies if they perceive an existential threat from such a coalition. Despite its initial promise, the alliance between the Necrons and humanity would likely not endure indefinitely. The seeds of its eventual dissolution would be sown in its very foundation, a partnership based on necessity rather than mutual trust. The event that triggers the alliance's collapse could take many forms: a territorial dispute, the betrayal of shared agreements, or a major internal crisis within one of the factions. For example, should the Imperium's religious zealots gain enough influence, they might launch a crusade against Necron-held worlds, shattering the fragile trust that had been established. Alternatively, a resurgence of Necron ambition, fueled by the dynasty's desire to reclaim their former supremacy, could lead to a coordinated campaign against humanity once shared enemies like the Tyranids or Chaos have been neutralized. The Silent King, despite his pragmatism, might find himself compelled to act in accordance with the wishes of his subordinates, even if it means abandoning the alliance. In the aftermath of the alliance's collapse, the galaxy would likely face even greater instability than before. The temporary balance of power achieved during the alliance would dissolve, giving rise to new conflicts and rivalries. Other factions might exploit the vacuum created by the breakdown of the partnership, launching their own campaigns to seize control of contested territories. The lessons learned from the alliance, however, might linger, influencing future decisions about cooperation and diplomacy in the galaxy. While the alliance between the Necrons and humanity would be a fleeting chapter in the galaxy's history, its significance would endure. It would serve as a stark reminder of the possibilities and perils of collaboration in a universe defined by conflict and division. The legacy of this partnership would not be measured in its duration, but in the ways it challenges the assumptions and ambitions of the factions involved, leaving an indelible mark on the grim darkness of the far future.